Of mankind's intrigues, mysteries and dreads about nature, all reside in the octopus. The octopus simultaneously manages to capture our fascination in its gracefulness and morphing physiology, whilst frequently succeeding as the candidate for a media monster. The novelist Victor Hugo wrote, "The spectre lies upon you, the tiger can only devour you, the devilfish, horrible, sucks your lifeblood away." And it is the ambivalence that surrounds the octopus that awards it its power. There is no other organism so contradictory to our understanding about what an invertebrate should be. It may as well have descended into Earth's oceans like some Lovecraftian comet, long before the common filers we use to organise animal categories came into being. And yet it is very much a product of our planet, belonging in the same bracket as the slugs and worms we can find in our gardens. Here are where the similarities end, however. The octopus is an animal with 8 brains, each designated to one of its 8 long tentacles, and each tentacle possesses 2 rows of grasping suckers, every one minutely flexible and adjustable to the creature's command. They have 3 hearts. Their mouth is in their armpit. They have venom like a snake and a saliva that can corrode flesh. Octopus eyes are panoramic and independently move like a chameleon's. They can even detect polarized light, which we cannot see. Even their blood, rich in copper compared to our iron, runs royal blue. In the book The Soul of the Octopus, Cy Montgomery succinctly captures the alien essence of this animal by stating that the octopus represents the great mystery of the other. And yet, in keeping with its contradictory nature, the alien speaks out to us from its ocean lair in an all too familiar language: intelligence. The controversies over animal intelligence are largely a product of our inability to empathise with the psychic experience of a species other than our own. But at the same time, we often run into a prejudice that always tries to diminish the inner lives of animals into oblivion. René Descartes put forward the notion that only humans think, and therefore only humans belong in a moral universe. Animals, by contrast, are unthinking machines, dominated by the world of instincts which we, as higher creatures, control through reason. This attitude became so pervasive that many scientists and philosophers are put off by the idea that animals experience anything other than instinct and base stimuli. The famous naturalist Jane Goodall, who revolutionised our appreciation of primate behaviour, was so intimidated by this prejudice that she withheld her findings for 20 years. Along with many other organisms, the octopus is challenging this cultural attitude, and this video will be a veneration of not just the animal, but also a call to re-inject a much-needed dose of humility and wonder back into our appreciation of nature, which, where we see time and time again, when approached under the right temperament, is the benefactor of both intrigue and innovation within our human intelligence. So where do we begin? Well, one of the markers for intelligence in animals surely has to be curiosity. Curious animals like ourselves are in an active and intimate communion with the environment. These animals are driven not by blind obedience to sense data, but by a preoccupying intimation of the novel and the new. Octopus in both the wild and in captivity are seen to display such behaviour when new objects are placed inside their territory. These objects are regarded initially with suspicion, then with intrigue, followed by an exploratory phase whereby the octopus discovers it through taste. Taste is the primary sense power of the octopus, as vision is for humans. The suckers along its tentacles provide the tasting organ, and it has up to 1,600 of them, which possess specialised receptor cells called chemoreceptors. Research has shown that octopus are 100 times more sensitive to tasting chemicals dissolved in salt water, as the human tongue is to tasting flavours dissolved in distilled water. And intelligence is reciprocal to sensitivity. Animals with complex nervous systems experience the world in a far more nuanced and intensified manner, and they are provoked by that intensity to know it, to define it, to reconcile it through their means to consciousness. But do octopus even have such a thing as consciousness? And if so, is it anything alike to our own? One such indicator of conscious experience is in recognizability. To recognize something, literally to recognize something, suggests that a phenomena has previously been cognized by the intelligence, and become familiar by reintroduction. If an animal weren't sensitively conscious, how would it be able to recognize it again? Octopus have been shown to recognize individual people, and even make behavioural responses based on their own selective preference. In other words, they like certain people and dislike others based on their own unique temperament. In the book recently mentioned, Montgomery describes an otherwise friendly octopus who would greet a certain biologist with a cold blast of salt water which it ejected out of its breathing tube. It hosed that person, and only that person. And it goes both ways. Human beings have always reacted off their relationship to animals, and what's arisen from that is a myriad of conceptual and cultural responses. We relate to spiders in a far, far different way than we relate to dogs, and we relate to dogs in a remarkably more subtle way than we do with wolves. And like I said, there are a variety of folk and cultural associations that we call on to relate to animals, instilling in them aspects of what we consciously, or perhaps even unconsciously, recognise in ourselves. This is why across so many cultures animals have become the symbols of the soul. In the book Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung wrote about the time he spent with primitive tribes in Africa who, upon seeing him descend from a ladder in a different way than they usually did, attributed to him the animal soul of the bear. In another example where an old woman had died, someone had noticed a dead crocodile on their travels, and fashioned together that her animal soul of the crocodile had died at the same time as her. In these examples, we see the essential ingredient novelty given over to curiosity, and with the additional creative element so readily demonstrated by our species that can sample such elements and weave them into new conceptualizations of life that allow our minds to reconcile the event to consciousness. These conceptual responses in humans should be seen for what they are, as expressions of intelligent organisms, and therefore by logic should be incorporated into our models of nature. The fact that it's typically psychologists and anthropologists who take such matters seriously betrays a huge problem at the heart of the internal culture of science. And the question as to whether or not these conceptual associations demonstrate a sound model of reading into reality is besides the point. They are still the products of living systems, and should not simply be waved away by some outdated pretension that also regards things like the inner lives of animals as lying beneath the threshold of acceptable consideration. But surely the ultimate nail in the coffin that would lay to rest the prejudice that animals do not possess complex inner lives would be the occurrence of dreams. Dreams not only relay an internally generated model of conscious experience, they also insinuate an intimate awareness and engagement with life in the organism, surely an indication of both a sensitive intelligence and some form of inner life. We have known that many animals dream for some time. Rats have been shown to dream of the mazes that scientists place them in, because the neurons in rats' brain fire in very specific patterns when they are inside the mazes. Scientists have been able to pinpoint the precise parts of the maze that the animals were in based on these neural patterns, and I'll leave a link to the MIT research group that discovered this in the description bar below. And what of the octopus dream? What are the dreams of a life form that thinks in taste? What are the nightmares in an organism whose body moves as a mutating medium in oceans of flavour and hidden lights that we cannot see? Our inability to even begin to contemplate the minds of animals is proportional to our insistence on forcing our mental frameworks into them. This prime error of calculation is also responsible for why we diminish, or even flat out deny, the existence of their inner lives. The American naturalist Henry Beston stated, "Animals are not brethren. They are not underlings, but beings gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendour and travail of the earth." Even if we never get to experience life as another animal, the contemplation of such mysteries opens us up to the wider mysteries of life, and reminds us to be considerate of the true dynamism of nature's expression, beyond our efforts to conform it into proportions that seem reasonable to us. And it was an octopus called Athena, named after the Greek goddess of wisdom, that instilled this in Cy Montgomery when he submerged into her world. As we stroked her in the tank, we entered into Athena's experience of time, liquid, slippery, and ancient, flowing at a different pace than any clock. Perhaps, I muse, this is the pace at which the Creator thinks, in this weighty, graceful, liquid manner, like blood flows, not like synapses fire. Taking our hands out of Athena's tank felt like breaking a spell. I was suddenly desperate, uncomfortable, awkward and incompetent. Even after rinsing my skin in hot water for nearly a minute, I was so cold that I couldn't pick up the pen in my purse. It was as if I had trouble returning to the person, to the writer I was before. Such interactions with the intelligence of other animals readily produces the same effects as a mystical experience. We are taken temporarily out of ourselves and into a new revelation of what life could be, only to return disorientated and bewildered back into the confines of our own skin, where we re-examine our beliefs about what constitutes reality. And if animals are symbols to us, then perhaps the octopus is the greatest symbol of intelligence itself, in all of its dynamism, mutability, and strangeness. But above all, I think the octopus represents the great inspiring mystery of life, that within all things that we can perceive, define, and measure, there will always be something more, that within all chaos, as Jung put it, there is a cosmos, within all disorder, a secret order. All truly dynamic thinkers and culture creators have at some time been provoked by this mystery and harnessed it to fit their genius. Thinkers such as Albert Einstein, who wrote, "The most beautiful thing that we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed." This insight into the mystery of life, coupled though it be by fear, has also given rise to religion. To know that what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their most primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling is at the centre of true religiousness. In this sense, and in this sense only, I belong in the ranks of devoutly religious men.